Hello everyone and welcome to Myth and Magic. So, as you can tell, we are not doing story time in the way we have in the past, where we talk about stories concerning the individual or creature that we talked about in the previous video. We're moving on to our next dragon. And like I mentioned before, there are stories to be told, but those are going to be later down the line. So for right now, we are moving on to the wyvern or wyvern, depending on your preference. I can't seem to pick mine. So here we are, Fire and Legends, where we are diving deep into the history, culture, and stories behind some of the most fascinating mythical creatures. So today we are moving on and exploring the eerie, mysterious, and sometimes misunderstood creature known as the wyvern. What exactly is a wyvern? And how did it become a symbol of strength and terror in medieval Europe? And why does it continue to capture our imaginations in fantasy literature and games, animation, music, all those things? Let's talk about it. So first things first, what is a wyvern? It's a dragon, but with a twist. So you have, unlike traditional dragons that have 4 legs and their wings coming out from their backs, wyverns only have 2 hind legs with their wings acting as their forelimbs, much the way that you see Smaug and the dragons, I believe, if I am remembering correctly. Like I mentioned in my previous video, I never watched Game of Thrones, but I think that the dragons there are more wyvern in the style, in their body style. They are typically depicted as 2-legged, winged reptiles, often with a serpentine tail, like most dragons. It's that tail, though, it's sometimes barbed or venomous. Why not? And this is one of those things that really set the wyvern apart. While dragons are most often known for their fire-breathing abilities, and though we mentioned in our last video that they have now developed and evolved to have other types of breath powers, but typically fire, wyverns are more commonly associated with the venomous breath or poisonous bites. Imagine creatures that use its barbed tail like a whip or a stinger. Definitely not something you want to encounter in a dark forest or around the corner of, I don't know, anywhere. All right, so what about the etymology of wyvern? The term comes from Old French wyver. I did a really good job with a pronunciation guide in my last video. I don't think I did as good of a job here, but here we are. Wyver, if you want to add a little bit of the for the R, which means viper or serpent. If you are a French speaker or you know, maybe, well, actually, I guess I could look it up. Wyvre, with a soft rolled or tapped R at the end, typical of medieval French pronunciation. So, wyvre. I'm not going to pretend that my French accent, though I've been working on it because we're auditioning for a show that may or may not call for a French accent. I will not pretend that I am very good at it. So there we are. This means viper or serpent. It's rooted in the Latin word vipera, referring to snakes or venomous creatures. So it's no surprise that wyverns are often depicted as serpentine and dangerous, with their venomous tendencies woven into their mythology. Historically, wyverns were very prominent in European heraldry. In Middle Ages, they were used on coats of arms, shields, and banners, particularly in England and France. They symbolized strength, protection, and military power. Essentially, the wyvern was a symbol of dominance on the battlefield. Think of it like the military insignia of the time. But unlike dragons, which were often portrayed as wise, mystical creatures after some development, wyverns were more beast-like. So think the Western dragon, which we talked about previous video, intelligent, sentient, can speak the human tongue if they so choose, or at least have an understanding of human language. Wyverns were, they weren't as cunning or intelligent as Western dragons. They were more brute, force, terror creatures, which is why you probably would have seen them on the banners of a battlefield of you're just gonna get the teeth. Now it's in the folklore where wyverns really start to show their menacing side. In many legends, wyverns were guardians of treasure, much like dragons. But they also had a darker role, with some myths describing them as plague bringers, spreading disease wherever they went. For the people of the Middle Ages, this connection to disease made the wyvern a creature to be feared, almost as much as the plagues that ravaged Europe at the time. One of the most famous tales involving a wyvern is the Lambton worm. From English folklore. In this story, a young man, after neglecting his duty, accidentally creates a massive wyvern-like creature that terrorizes his village. It grows so large and deadly that it requires the hero to confront it in order to lift a curse on his family. The tale highlights the wyvern's dangerous nature and the heavy consequences of tampering with forces beyond one's control and not doing your job. Very on par with fairy tales that always have kind of a warning or a lesson to be taught. The one that comes most to mind is The Boy Who Cried Wolf. That's a very obvious one. So something like that. Fast forward to modern times, and wyverns are still a favorite in fantasy literature and video games. They've made their way into worlds like Game of Thrones, Dungeons and Dragons, and Monster Hunter. Now, I mentioned this, but I don't actually know if the dragons in Game of Thrones are Western dragons or wyverns, whichever you want to go with. If you have seen or read the books, I will go to the source, the books, though I don't know if the author would have... I mean, he seemed pretty detailed. I've never read the books, never seen the show. But with the amount of world building and whatnot he did, it would make sense that he would have a distinguished difference between the two, especially since he went out of his way to try and prove the hero's journey as obsolete. I don't believe that to be true. I really love the hero's journey. I even studied it in college. But regardless of my opinion on all of that, he seemed like he was pretty detailed. So if you know what the intention was, if it was wyvern or Western dragon, tell me in the comments, because I'm lazy and I don't want to look it up right now. Okay, so we're talking about wyverns right now. This contrast between wyverns and dragons is interesting. Dragons, after all, often symbolize wisdom, power, and even greed. Greed in their origins, wisdom and power as you kind of progressed in mythology. In many cultures, they're seen as noble or wise creatures, while wyverns, they represent chaos, destruction, and primal fear. This duality plays out in fantasy stories where wyverns often serve as obstacles or antagonistic for heroes to overcome. You'd also see this with Western dragons, but the wyvern has taken on more of that role. I do think, however, that people are finding the aesthetic of the wyvern more appealing, potentially, which is why you see that body style more often, like with Smaug in Peter Jackson's The Hobbit adaptation. In the books, he is a Western dragon, as far as I understand it. Tolkien did understand the difference between all of this stuff. And so he would have been specific. And I think he even has wyverns in his lore, but I don't remember where my tangent was going. Oh, yes. Okay, so Smaug, Western Dragon, pretty sure. Jackson turned him in more of a wyvern body type. And he very much represents the original basis of a just dragon in general, which was chaos, evil, greed, all those things. I don't know if Tolkien ever actually wrote a dragon who was good. Because I think the idea of a good dragon is mostly a recent development. And so while Western dragons kind of took on this wisdom, noble kind of stance or evolution, wyverns kind of became then the antagonistic side of the traditional origin of what they came from. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Let's dive a little deeper into why wyverns are so compelling. At least I find them compelling. Even today. I mean, I find them compelling. Other people find them compelling today. Kind of. I don't know. You tell me. Do you find wyverns compelling? In terms of psychology, some scholars argue that wyverns represent our deepest primal fears. Chaotic forces that we struggle to control or understand. They embody those untamed aspects of nature that we can't tame, much like the unpredictable threats of war or disease or natural disasters. And speaking of disease, cultural anthropologists suggest that wyverns also reflect the fears of medieval societies. We mentioned before, they were thought to be the bringers of plagues. Diseases were rampant in medieval times, and many people had no understanding of their origins. They didn't wash their hands, at least in medieval Europe, or parts of medieval Europe. I'm not going to pretend to know the hygienic habits of ancient cultures, but I know some were cleaner than others, and England and America at least didn't figure it out until a little late in the game. Wyverns, as creatures capable of spreading sickness, might have been a way for people to give form to their fears, as they were visible symbols of the invisible threat of illness. Let's talk about wyverns in pop culture and their lasting impact. They've moved from medieval bestiaries and heraldic symbols to more familiar creatures in games and films. We mentioned Game of Thrones. For example, they feature wyvern-like creatures in the form of dragons, but these are still distinctly different in terms of their nature. Wyverns are usually more vicious, more dangerous, and less inclined toward the wisdom we typically associate with dragons. And even knowing the little I do about Game of Thrones, they call her the mother of dragons. And I don't know how to classify the dragons in Game of Thrones, because on one hand, they have the bodies of wyverns. They seem very beast-like, but also intelligent and have, well, I don't know. She's the mother of dragons, so of course they would bond with her. So I don't know. Maybe they are just wyverns. Tell me in the comments. Let me know. I'm having a conundrum, and I don't want to look it up. I guess that's my problem. Okay. In modern fantasy, wyverns are often used in settings where brute strength and savagery are the key traits of the creature. They've become synonymous with danger, aggression, and sometimes the very essence of nature's wrath. Whether you're reading about one in a fantasy novel, battling it in your favorite video game, or Dungeons and Dragons, though you don't. Sometimes you will pause in the middle of a battle. Most often not. So if you've ever fought one, or maybe you're in the middle of fighting one, or if you're simply just admiring its evil roots, the wyvern continues to be a captivating part of our mythology. It's a creature that represents primal fears, chaos, and destruction, but it also symbolizes strength and power. It's been with us through centuries, from the banners of medieval knights to the pages of modern fantasy. Okay, so where can you find wyverns in pop culture? We mentioned Monster Hunter, video game, Dark Souls. The Witcher series also features wyverns as formidable foes, typically more agile and venomous than traditional dragons, so probably a wyvern. TV and film, while many shows blur, they blur the line between dragons and wyverns. Game of Thrones, we've talked about that too much, but they're there. In literature, in fantasy novels, wyverns continue to carry on their symbolism, and they appear in works like The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini and The Belgariad by David Eddings. Sometimes a lesser dragonkin, or sometimes as lesser dragonkin or corrupted variants. In heraldry and mascots, you have historically, wyverns were used in British heraldry to represent strength and ferocity. And today they're mascots for schools, sport teams, and even military units, especially in the UK and the US. And then you have your tabletop games, my favorite. I don't think I've actually fought a wyvern in D&D yet. We've definitely done your traditional dragon types, but in D&D, they treat wyverns as distinct creatures from dragons. They're less intelligent, more beast-like, and often venomous. So they're a classical encounter for adventurers when it comes to kind of just how they've always been. So that is it for wyverns. They are very interesting, a very kind of shoe-worn, shoe-old. They kind of have stayed the same. They've taken on the darker side of what dragons started out as, and I suspect that's before there was really a difference, a separation. So Western dragons can be this. They started out as this, maybe not as ferocious, but they eventually transformed and became more sentient and neutral in their alignment. So they could be good, evil, or anything in between, really. Wyverns, more animalistic, more like wolves. Well, no, because wolves won't necessarily just go for you. What is it? Tasmanian devils, honey badgers, kind of like where they're just naturally vicious, and they don't talk to you. Now, like I mentioned in my last video, the rules in creative works are made to be broken. If you want a wyvern who, I don't know, maybe you're writing a story about wyverns, and maybe they are sentient, and most of them are perhaps more inclined to be vicious and not necessarily evil, just violent and instinctual. And then you have one who just doesn't fit in with the world and who ventures off to find her place among those who are more like her in her nature, which for some reason isn't like everybody else, because that's a trope. The girl who is different from all the others. There's just something about her. Tropes are made to be broken. Rules are made to be broken. Like I said, learn the origins and the base for something so that you can make it your own. You could even just go on the complete opposite, where wyverns are like dragons and very intelligent, and maybe they are a society who is so intelligent that they act beast-like so that they are just left alone. They don't want people to know that they are scholars They don't want people to know that they're anything more than a vicious yippy dog. I don't know. Do your thing, man. I am in full support of your creativity. There are very few things in this world where I'm like, no, don't do that. Dragons, have fun. Wyverns, have fun. Do your thing. If people don't like it, that's their problem. Now, there are certain things that, I don't know, or it can get too weird. But I guess that's a genre. There are genres. Find your people. Just don't do anything bad. I don't know how you would. And everybody's definition of bad is different. I don't know. This is a moral gray area that I'm not going to get into. Be creative. Have fun. And that's it. Be kind. Be beautiful. Spread joy and love in this world. And again, like I said last video, I hope that you're having fun. I hope this is just, I don't know, something in the fantastical, out of realism, where you can just sit back and enjoy something that's not real life. And maybe you'll find a spark of creativity and inspiration as we talk about these very mythological and fantasy things. I'm doing a lot of this research for my own writing, for my own creativity, and I'm excited to use the stuff that we've been talking about. And that's it. I can start going on a tangent, but I won't. You're not here for that. Anyway, I love you all. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.